Well, it is Valentine's Day, yes, and whether you're celebrating with your partner, friends, or perhaps not at all, love is in the air today. But even for those in fulfilling relationships, things can sometimes fall into a bit of a lull. So how do you maintain that happily ever after? Well, joining us with some answers, we hope, is Cameron Gordon. He's a psychology professor at Vancouver Island University. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you do research on positive psychology. How is this a deviation from, say, the traditional relationship-based psychology?
Yeah, well, in traditional psychology, it focuses predominantly on helping people to become less unhappy. And that's probably a worthwhile endeavor. But in pursuit of that, we realized over time that we didn't know a whole lot about how to be more happy. So it turns out that bringing down the stress is not the same thing as increasing happiness. And as that applies to couples, we have a number of relationship interventions that are really good at helping people to not hate each other anymore, but we're not as knowledgeable about how to help people be really happy. And so that's kind of what I focus on in my work.
Big difference between not hating each other and actually liking each other. That's a good point. Humans are naturally problem solvers. Does this ever get in the way of our love lives?
Well, I think it can if you're not paying attention to it, right? Our brains are very well designed to root out problems and solve them, and that gives us a great evolutionary advantage to be able to survive. But while our brains are great tools for survival, they don't necessarily promote happiness. The cool thing about our brain, though, is you can put effort into things and override its natural default. So if you really put effort into learning how to be happy and constructing happiness in your life, your brain responds to that.
How does this approach affect long-term couples then? People change as they age, we know that. So what about relationships?
Yeah, well, in long-term relationships, I think the thing that is one of the things that's really helpful to keep in mind is that you can naturally gravitate toward solving all the problems that you have to solve in life. You're focused on careers, maybe raising children, tackling illnesses and things like that. And so you can naturally gravitate to a position where life is revolving around solving problems. And that's when it's really important to step back periodically and make sure that you're asking yourself, hey, are we having fun? Are we putting enough effort into really making sure that we have fun? Because our brain won't naturally gravitate to make sure it's doing that. We have to consciously build that into life.
That's an interesting point. I was just going to ask you about the tangibles. What are some takeaways, some practical measures people could take besides perhaps asking those questions, you think?
Yeah, well, I think putting some effort into date nights and planning fun events, it's very common for me to speak with couples who say, boy, when we first got together, we went out to concerts and did fun things. And then, we haven't done that for a long time. So I say, well, let's see if we can try to get back to that. I think it's also important, in some of my research, we've shown that when you are having fun, make sure that you're really savoring that experience, because you can get into the habit of maybe sitting down and having a nice dinner together, but thinking, well, what are we doing after this? And so I always want to encourage couples, hey, you're there with somebody that you really like. Don't worry about what's happening next. Just savor this moment. And you can use those opportunities to savor and enrich those experiences to generate a lot of gratitude for your partner too, which is easy to start taking somebody for granted when you've been together for a long time and shared life together. So consciously trying to build fun into your life that you can enrich with your full attention, and then let that fuel gratitude, I think, are three takeaway messages I'd like to share with viewers tonight.
Love that. Live in the moment. I think that can apply to many areas. Thank you so much for your insight today.